You ever feel that deep, kind of primal need to make something of yourself? To build a legacy, to make a name. Well, it turns out that's one of the oldest stories in the world. Today, we're going to dive into the ancient book of Genesis and explore two totally different blueprints for greatness and what they might just tell us about our own ambitions. I mean, it really all boils down to this, doesn't it? This drive for fame, for a legacy, for just security. It's a totally universal human thing. We all want to know that our lives mattered, that we built something that's going to last. And the source text we're looking at today uses this exact impulse as the starting point for two completely different ways to live. And here they are. On one side, you've got the way of Babel. This is the path of human effort, of grinding and building our way to the top. But on the other side, you have the way of Abraham, a path of trust, of receiving your significance as a gift. This right here, this is the core conflict we're going to unpack. Striving versus receiving. Okay, so let's jump into that first path, the one that, let's be honest, probably feels a little more natural to most of us. This is the story of a massive human project, a kind of blueprint for how to become self-made, and it's all symbolized by the infamous Tower of Babel. This is basically the mission statement of the builders of Babel, straight from the text. And wow, is it revealing. Just listen to the language. Let us build for ourselves, make a name for ourselves. It is all about human initiative, human control, and human glory. And if you break down their game plan, it really gets at three fundamental things we all want. First, supremacy. They wanted to build a tower to the heavens, right? To be the absolute masters of their own destiny. Second, identity. They wanted to make a name for themselves, to create their own brand, their own fame. And third, security. They built a city to keep everyone together, to make sure they wouldn't be scattered and left vulnerable. This is the human solution for significance. But then, just one chapter later in Genesis, the whole story just pivots. It leaves the crowded city and that massive tower behind and zooms in on one single man, Abram, who we later get to know as Abraham. And his story doesn't start with a big project, it starts with a promise. And what a wild call it was. I mean, he's 75 years old. That's an age when most people are kicking back, settling down for good. And he's told to leave literally everything, his home, his family, his entire country, for a destination he isn't even told. This is not a story about a young go-getter's ambition. It's a story about an old man's trust in something way beyond himself. And this is where the contrast just becomes crystal clear. Look at this. The very things the people of Babel were killing themselves to achieve, God just freely promises to Abraham. They wanted supremacy by building a tower. God says, don't worry about that. I will make you a great nation. They wanted identity by making their own name famous. God says, I will make your name great. They wanted security by building walls. God promises, I will be your security. So the crucial point is right here. The text is showing us this huge contrast. One group is desperately trying to seize greatness for themselves, while this one guy is positioned to just receive it as a gift. It's a fundamental change in how you approach your entire life. Now, this completely different foundation, relying on a promise instead of your own project, it naturally leads to a completely different way of living. And the text gives us this beautiful symbol for it, the choice between building permanent towers and living in temporary tents. So what did Abraham actually do with his life? Well, the text really zeroes in on two things. First, he lived in tents. And this wasn't just because it was practical, it was a statement. He saw himself as a traveler, a pilgrim, not someone who was building a permanent earthly empire for himself. And second, he built altars. Where the Babel builders made a huge monument to their own name, Abraham built simple places of worship dedicated to God's name. So why live like that? Why live in a tent when you could build a tower? Well, this quote from later in the Bible gives us the reason. It says, he wasn't against cities. He was just holding out for a better one, a city with eternal foundations, one designed and built by God himself. His focus was on the future, and that freed him from having to desperately secure his present. It's just a complete shift in perspective. But living by faith is never a walk in the park. So what happens when the promise you staked your entire life on looks like it's completely falling apart? This story does not shy away from this. In fact, it dives headfirst into a massive crisis of faith for Abraham. Almost immediately, and I mean immediately, after getting these unbelievable promises, Abraham's life takes a nosedive. He gets hit with this series of trials that seem almost perfectly designed to attack and dismantle every single thing he was just promised. Just think about how fast this all unravels. First, he's promised a land, but a famine immediately forces him out of it. Okay, then he's promised this great nation through his family, but then his wife Sarah is taken from him and put in Pharaoh's palace. And finally, he's promised divine protection, but now he's totally powerless before a foreign king who could kill him without a second thought. In just a matter of days, the whole promise looks like a total sham. So you have to ask, why is this part of the story? Is it just random terrible luck? Well, according to the source, this isn't random tragedy at all. This test has a purpose. It's meant to reveal what the true foundation of his hope is, and to forge something much, much deeper. So the idea here is that the test isn't a punishment. It's more like a crucible. It's a trial of trust, designed to find out if his faith is really just based on his circumstances being good, or if it's based on the character of the one who made the promise in the first place. It's about developing a kind of resilience that can't be shaken by what's happening on the outside. And the source points to this passage from the New Testament book of Romans as a kind of roadmap for how this works. It argues that trials and difficulties, they're not a dead end. They actually produce endurance. And that endurance, over time, forges real strength of character. And it's that proven character that gives birth to a confident, unshakable hope. A hope that's so much more than just wishful thinking.
And that brings us all the way back to the central theme of this incredible ancient story. True greatness, real significance, it isn't something we can build with our own two hands. It's not found in how high our towers are. According to this text, it's something that is received as a gift. And it's a gift that's forged in the fire of trusting a promise, especially when everything, and I mean everything, seems to be going wrong.
So, in the end, the story leaves us with a choice, and it frames it as this one final, really piercing question. In our own search for a life that matters, which blueprint are we using? Are we building a tower, trying to construct our own monument? Or are we building an altar, trusting in a promise that's way bigger than ourselves?
Welcome back to the deep dive. So we've got a stack of sources today that take us into one of the most foundational stories in ancient tradition. We're talking about the call of Abraham in Genesis chapter 12.
Right. And we're not treating this as, dusty history. Our sources frame this as a kind of philosophical showdown.
A showdown that's still playing out, really, in your life and mine, right now.
That's it exactly. Our goal isn't just to summarize the story. It's to pull out these two competing worldviews, these two sort of blueprints for how to live.
Okay, so what are they?
Well, on one side, you have this attitude of human control, of supremacy. The sources call it the Tower of Babel mindset.
And on the other?
The other is this really counterintuitive path. It's a path of, divine trust and pilgrimage, the path of Abraham.
It sounds like the difference between trying to build your own shelter from scratch versus trusting someone's already built the foundation for you.
That's a great way to put it. And we're going to see how Abraham's choice, this decision to follow a command he can't fully see, really challenges our whole modern obsession with, creating our own identity from the ground up.
Okay, let's unpack this then. It all begins with a really dramatic, almost impossible command.
It's huge. So Abraham is 75 years old. He's settled in a place called Haran. And then, bam, his entire security net is just shredded.
The command is basically walk away from everything you know.
Right.
Your country, your relatives, your father's house.
And go to a land that I will show you. Not that I'm telling you about now.
Yeah, that I'll show you later. It's the ultimate ask for blind trust.
And it means giving up his entire identity. I mean, in the ancient world, everything about you, your security, your future, it was all tied to your land and your family.
So to leave all that is to basically become a nobody, voluntarily.
Exactly. But the sources show us the payoff comes immediately. After that command to tear everything down, the text gives this incredible three-part blueprint for the new life he's about to get.
These are the core promises.
The core promises. First is the promise of supremacy. The text says, I will make of you a great nation.
So future influence, legacy, cultural weight.
All of it. Second, the promise of identity and fame. I will bless you and make your name great.
A lasting reputation. And then the third piece.
Security. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. That's total protection no matter what happens.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting because our sources draw this powerful contrast. We have to remember the story that comes right before this one.
The Tower of Babel.
Exactly. And what's so fascinating is that the Babel builders wanted the exact same three things.
The very same things. Supremacy, fame, and security. But they tried to get them through their own massive human effort.
Right. They sought supremacy by trying to build a great city with a tower that reaches the sky.
And they wanted fame and identity by saying, literally, let us make a name for ourselves.
And their motivation for security was so clear. They said they were building this thing to prevent us from being scattered.
It was a huge centralized project to protect themselves against the unknown, against vulnerability.
So on one hand, you have this massive group effort, humanity saying, we will build this monument to guarantee our own fame and security.
And on the other hand, you have Abraham, who just receives it. He gets supremacy, identity, and security without even seeking it himself.
Just by trusting and obeying. That's a huge discovery right there.
It makes the whole Tower of Babel project look, well, kind of pointless. Why spend generations trying to build your way to fame when it can be given to you as a gift?
The source material connects this to a much later teaching, right?
It does, to Matthew 6.33. Seek the kingdom of God above all else, and he will give you everything you need.
So when we look at our own lives, I mean, how often are we building a battle tower?
All the time.
It's not physical bricks, maybe, but we're building these massive resumes or, curating our social media for validation.
Or hoarding money because we're afraid of the future. It's the same impulse. We're trying to build our way to success, identity, and security.
When the core insight here is that you can't actually climb your way there. According to these sources, true fame and security have to be given. They have to be provided.
Yeah, the human tower is always fragile. It's always vulnerable.
So Abraham doesn't just sit on this. He acts immediately. He takes his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all their possessions.
It's the whole community, really, and he just starts walking toward Canaan at age 75.
And he's walking into a land that's already inhabited by the Canaanites, so it's not like empty and waiting for him.
Not at all. He eventually gets to a place called Shechem, and there the Lord appears to him again and confirms the promise about the land.
Which is a huge moment. He's arrived, the promise is confirmed, but he's still surrounded by powerful people, and he owns nothing.
And this is where we get to the heart of what our sources call the pilgrim lifestyle. It's about what Abraham did, which was the total opposite of what the tower builders did.
He didn't build a city. He didn't try to fortify a settlement.
No. He did two very specific, very symbolic things. First, he lived in tents.
Tents.
Just tents. Not fortified houses, not walls. Portable, temporary shelters.
It's a statement. He's basically demonstrating that he's a stranger, a foreigner.
Exactly, that his real citizenship is somewhere else. He's deliberately choosing vulnerability, even on the very land that was promised to him.
The second thing he did.
He built altars. He built one in Shechem and then another one later. And altars are, they're also temporary structures. They're points of dedication, not defense.
So they're for worship and communication. It's the complete opposite of the Babel Tower.
Absolutely. The tower was one permanent, self-glorifying monument. The altars were temporary markers of gratitude dedicated to someone else, and he would just build a new one wherever he went.
He was seeking a spiritual city, not a physical fortress.
And the sources connect this directly to the epistle to the Hebrews, which says Abraham lived in tents as a stranger because he was looking for a permanent city whose architect and builder is God.
There's also that amazing little detail our sources pull out about the Apostle Paul.
Oh, yeah, that he was a tent maker by trade.
It's this perfect literal link between the physical work of making tents and the spiritual mindset of being a pilgrim.
It's an incredible image. It makes you realize how much of our own anxiety comes from trying to turn our temporary tents into permanent towers.
Okay, but this raises a question. If Abraham's actions were so minimal, just living in tents and building altars, what decides who gets this incredible promise? Why him?
And that leads us to the next big discovery from the sources.
Yeah.
The nature of divine choice, or what they call election.
Okay, this is a heavy concept.
It is. The promise given to Abraham, the one that guarantees his fame, his nation, his security, is, and this is key, it's not dependent on his lineage or his effort or even his goodness.
So our sources use the text from Romans 9 to explain this, right?
Okay.
The idea that it's not about being a physical descendant, but a descendant of the promise.
Yes, the source material really hammers this point. Election is based entirely on divine purpose, not human merit. And the classic example they use is Isaac's sons, Jacob and Esau.
And the crucial detail there is the timing.
The timing is everything. As the text says, before they were even born, before they had done anything good or bad.
The choice was already made. The elder would serve the younger.
Right. And that fact is the whole point. It proves the source's main statement. It is God who decides to have mercy. It does not depend on our desire or our effort.
You can't earn it. Which brings us right back to the failure of the Tower of Babel.
Exactly. So the promise is given freely, regardless of merit. But here's the paradox. What happens when the chosen person, the one who gets this incredible unearned promise, immediately fails?
And that's the climax of Genesis 12, the test.
An immediate and dramatic test. Abraham had just received promises of land, a fruitful wife, and security. And what happens? He's immediately tested in all three of those areas.
First, the land. The promised land fails him. A brutal famine hits Canaan.
So he's forced to go to Egypt, moving away from the promised destination. He's a foreigner, totally dependent on them. The promise of land seems, instantly worthless.
Then the promises about his wife and his security get tested. As they get near Egypt, Abraham gets scared.
He knows his wife, Sarai, is beautiful, and he's terrified that the Egyptians will kill him to take her. So instead of trusting that divine security he was just promised, he makes a human calculation based on fear.
And his solution is just.
Yeah.
It's a huge failure of trust. He tells Sarai to lie, to say she's his sister.
It's pure self-preservation, a complete lack of faith in that moment.
And the lie works, but in the worst possible way.
The worst way. The Egyptian officials see her, they're impressed, and they take her straight to Pharaoh's palace.
And Pharaoh, thinking Abraham is about to be his brother-in-law, showers him with gifts. Sheep, cattle, servants. Abraham literally profits from his own lie.
It's such a tense moment. He has the promise of security, but he acts out of fear, which leads to a lie, which leads to him getting rich. But his wife is now in Pharaoh's harem, and the whole promise is about to be destroyed.
But the promise is stronger than his failure.
That's the point. The narrative corrects itself through divine intervention. The Lord sends terrible plagues on Pharaoh and his entire household because of Sarai.
She was protected by the promise, not by Abraham's clever lie.
Right. And Pharaoh eventually figures it out. He calls Abraham in and just rips into him. Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? I mean, Pharaoh, the pagan king, is acting more ethically than the chosen one.
And Pharaoh kicks him out, orders his men to escort Abraham, his wife, and all his stuff, including all the gifts out of Egypt.
So Abraham leaves with his wife safe. And he's actually significantly richer than when he went in.
So that brings up the big question, right? Why let this happen? Why let him fail so badly?
It's a great question. And the source explains that the goal isn't to test Abraham's perfection, but his persistence. This process of facing, proofs and difficulties, it develops endurance.
And that endurance develops character, which strengthens your hope.
Exactly. The sources argue the test wasn't, can Abraham avoid sinning? The test was, after you sin, after you fail, will you still rely on the promise that rescued you?
I see. So despite his failure, he leaves Egypt strengthened. He's actually more confident in that divine protection than when he went in because he saw it save him from himself.
The failure wasn't the end of the story. It was a painful but necessary part of the process. It proved the promise was fulfilled by divine action, not by human perfection.
This has been, wow, a really compelling deep dive. We've contrasted two whole philosophies of life.
On one side, you have the Babel attitude, human effort, building monuments, trying to seize fame and security for yourself.
And on the other, you have Abraham's path. Trust the promise, live like a pilgrim in a tent, and build altars of worship.
So the real takeaway for you listening is that this is a daily choice. Are we building towers of Babel in our careers, our social lives, trying to control the outcome?
Or are we embracing that tent mindset, acknowledging that our situation here is temporary, dedicating ourselves to something higher, and just trusting that the things that really matter are guaranteed?
Our sources conclude with a clear call to action, which is to renounce the Babel attitude, to stop building.
And instead, the focus should be on seeking what the text calls the kingdom and justice.
Because when we operate from that place of trust, the material stuff, the fame, the security, the success, it just comes. As the sources remind us, everything else will come as an addition.
And that's the essential knowledge we've gained from today's deep dive into the source material.